Mom sent a message you changed all the bedroom locks and don't want you coming over anymore you. Always make things of Wardy said nothing just stopped sending the $700 grocery gift cards he'd been. Secretly ordering for them each month a week later my. Brother called screaming Mom's blood sugar dropped there's no food in the house they replied. Awkward, isn't it? Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where loyalty dies, lies bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Let's tear into today's tale. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house that always felt a few degrees colder than it should have been, not temperature-wise. Emotionally, me Mother Claire was a practical woman, never cruel. Just absent in warmth, me Father Grant was the softer, on a kind man with a mechanical mind well spent. Weekends, fixing lawnmower sand, humming gospel tunes. In the garage, me brother Lucas came along 5 years after me, and from the moment he could throw a tantrum, the world revolved around him. The time I was in my early 30s, he had moved to Asheville and started an accounting business. He wasn't rich, but I was stably stayed single, partly by choice, partly by circumstance. Me clients respected me, co-workers liked me, had structure man. While back home, Lucas was bouncing between entrepreneurial ventures. Is a generous way of saying sold sneakers online and pitched crypto scams on Reddit. When my dad had his first stroke, I took time off to drive home and manage his craze, sat in doctor's offices, while Claire stared at the Wally ordered test kits and set up medication alarms. He paid for things they didn't realize. I paid for new medical chairs, monthly grocery esclacos, test strips after the second stroke. Things got worse. Dad couldn't speak much anymore. Claire was losing her grip emotionally, and mental Iliacas wasn't stepping up in any real way. Just posting inspirational memes about grinds set while Mom's fridge had half a bottle of mustard and a jar of olive oil. I did more. I created a system automated monthly grocery delivery as usually. Around $700 worth all through a cart under a different name so they wouldn't feel like they were being pitted. Drive down every second Saturday, check on Dad wipe down counters, clean expired food from the fridge. Me Mom would barely talk to Malukas, would nod and go back to his room. Still, I thought I was doing good until that text. It was the night before Halloween. He was checking in like I always did, asked if they needed anything for trick-or-treaters, or if Micah, Lucas's son, wanted any candino. Replied then late that night, we change all the bedroom locks and don't want you coming over anymore. You always make things of Wardy stared at the message for at least 10 minutes, read it again then again. It didn't even have punctuation, no explanation, just that cold, passive-aggressive tone he'd come to know so well. He didn't respond, he didn't ask what they meaned, he didn't try to fix Edie. Just stop it. He canceled the grocery delivery shut down the prepaid card, took their address off every automatic order I'd ever set up. He didn't warn them, he didn't say a word. It was the quietest revenge I've ever enacted. A week later, Lucas called me in a frenzy, let it ring twice, then picked it up. Was yelling, like really yelling, Gava, what the hell? Mom's blood sugar crashed. Last night, there's no food in the house. You can't just stop everything, like. Thought he took a breath, then calmly said, awkward, isn't it? And I hung up na screaming, no drama. I used those 3 words and thing in me settled that day it would be easy to pretend. I felt powerful at that moment, like some kind of avenging angel dealing out justice, but honestly, I just felt tyrannicades of carrying silent weight of being too much. Because I cared to muck off being cast as controlling, because I was organized off showing up and being told I was of Wardy got maybe 3 days of peace bar. The guilt started creeping in. Aunt Edith called Marosel's older sister's aid. She'd heard Mom collapsed and was taken to the hospital. That the neighbor had found here after the lights had been off for 2 days straight. That Lucas wasn't around. That hit me harder than I expected, not because I felt bad for Claire, because I knew the exact moment I chose myself. The whole thing fell apart. The hospital nurse called Nexty was still listed as an emergency contact. Claire was stable, but dehydrated as Orident angry drove down not to be the harabit, to be an adult since again when I got there Claire wouldn't look at Mesh was a wakebit. Her arms were cross-tight across her chest like a child refusing to near the nurse, a gentlewoman named Ria. Asked if I was the daughter before. I could answer Claire cut enemy son handles everything the nurse looked at May looked at Claire said. Nothing he stayed for maybe 10 minutes said. Let them know she was okay then I left didn't come back the next day. Or the day after Lucas didn't either apparently he posted on Facebook instead. Sometimes the worst snakes are the ones you call family classic. On the other hand, called me. 2 weeks later voice cracking quite said he didn't know I was the one buying all the food that he thought it was some program or something said he was sorry that his dad was never around. And mom never really did anything but yell at people who tried. To help me get it no said that made me cringe it because of the apology bit. Because I realized how long he'd been waiting for someone in that family. To finally see May told Micah he didn't owe me anything. But he insisted you kept us at Floati didn't see. It before I do now that conversation shifted something in minute in the fairy tale way where everything is suddenly okay but in the quiet meaningful way that makes you feel a little less Alana started texting me every now and then asking for advice. On resumes budgeting what kind of groceries were good to keep on hand it. Was strange being appreciated it made me realize how rare that had been in my life meanwhile. Claire got discharged and went back home. Lucas returned a tail between his legs and immediately started damage control. He sent me a long email 5 paragraphs of mixed blame, half-hearted apologies and spiritual sounding nonsense about forgiveness being divinate didn't reply then came. The call from the social worker, apparently the hospital, had flagged concerns during Claire's stay. Malnourishment things of neglect. They opened a small inquiry mostly to check on the living conditions and confirm someone was watching over her. When I was contacted, I was honest. I told them I hadn't been involved in over a month and that they'd actively told me not to come anymore, that they changed the locks, that they'd sent a text specifically telling me. I made things awkward and they didn't want me around. I emailed the text message as proof. The social worker didn't say much, but I could hear the pause. That pause that says everything. Apparently, the story Lucas gave was that I had abandoned them, that I just disappeared one day and left them. Without support. Classic Lucas. Never once took accountability, never once admitted that I'd been the one quietly carrying the load for years. A few weeks after that, I got another unexpected call, this time from one of Dad's old neighbors, Mrs. Noreen. She was in her late 70s, sharp as a tack, and used to live 3 doors down before moving to an assisted living place outside Durham. We hadn't spoken in a while, but she had always been kind to me growing up. She said she'd heard from someone at church that things were messy at my parents' house. I don't want to pry, Ava, she said, but I know what kind of girl you were. Always helping, always trying. That nearly broke me. I sat in my kitchen, tears silently streaming down my face, while she told me that she knew, that she always knew. You were a child trying to play nurse and peacemaker while everyone else just watched, she said. I thanked her, hung up. Then I made a decision. Not out of vengeance. Not even out of bitterness. But because something in me finally clicked. I didn't owe these people anything anymore. Not my money, not my time, not my presence. They didn't just close the door on me, they locked it and then blamed me for not knocking. So I leaned into my peace. Instead of grocery cards, I started sending $700 a month to a women's shelter in Asheville. One of my clients volunteers there, and she told me how desperate they always are for basic food and toiletries. I went from shipping gluten-free pastas and almond milk to my mom, to funding diapers and cereal boxes for women escaping abusive homes with nothing but their kids, and a trash bag of clothes. And for the first time, my generosity actually felt seen. They sent thank you cards, photos, handwritten notes. One said, because of you, I didn't have to choose between feeding my son and buying my insulin this month. I sat with that card for hours. My own mother let her insulin run out rather than tell me thank you. But a stranger who owed me nothing thanked me from her bones. The contrast was deafening. Around the same time, Claire's church friend reached out via Facebook, a woman named M&A, who I hadn't spoken to since. "Hi, school," she messaged. "Hey, Ava, I'm sorry if this is weird, but your mom mentioned you'd abandoned the family. I just wanted to say, I'm praying for you. I know there's more to the story." That one felt less like comfort and more like surveillance. I didn't reply, but I did change my privacy settings. A few days later, I received an Amazon package. No return address. Inside was a cheap book titled Releasing Anger, How to Heal and Forgive. I laughed out loud. Lucas style through and through. Passive aggressive, preachy, and entirely unaware of irony. They locked me out of the house, then tried to guilt me into feeling bad for standing in the rain. But I wasn't standing there anymore. I'd gone home. Not to Raleigh. Not to that cold house with dusty curtains and bitter air. But to myself. To quiet mornings, hot tea, fresh fruit, and books I actually had time to read now that I wasn't everyone's emergency backup plan. I started taking yoga again. Reconnected with an old college friend who had also been through some family estrangement. We'd swap stories over lunch once a month. My world didn't shrink. It expanded. They thought they were cutting me off, but what they really did was set me free. About 2 months after I started donating to the shelter regularly, I got another call from the social worker assigned to Claire's case. She asked if I would be open to a family mediation session. Apparently, Claire had requested it, or at least Lucas had, on her behalf. I paused before answering. Not because I was tempted. I wasn't. I had no delusions of a tearful reunion, or a sudden awakening where everyone realized how deeply they'd wronged me. But I was curious what they thought they still had to say after cutting me out and then blaming me for it. So I agreed. Reluctantly. It was held over Zoom, scheduled at a time that worked for me because I insisted on that boundary. The day of the session, I sat in my home office, lit a candle, and logged on with zero expectations. Just observation. The social worker, Celine, started the meeting with her practiced warmth, laying out the structure. Lucas was already in the Zoom waiting room, camera off. Username, Just B. Claire joined about 3 minutes late. Her camera was aimed slightly too high, giving me a view of her thinning gray hair and ceiling fan more than her face. Celine asked if anyone wanted to start by sharing their concerns. Silence. Then Lucas jumped in, camera still off. We'd just feel like Ava kind of gave up on the family. It felt really abrupt. I leaned in, made sure my voice was calm. I had practiced this. I received a text saying you changed the locks and didn't want me coming around anymore because I made things awkward. That's not abrupt. That's a message. A very clear one. Claire spoke then, finally angling her camera lower. Her face looked older than I remembered, tired, like the years were finally catching up to her. We didn't mean forever. I almost laughed. But ID and single quotes T. I just blinked. Slow. Double quotes. Then why never follow up? Why no apology? No explanation. More silence. Then she mumbled. You always made us feel like we weren't doing enough. It's exhausting. There it was. I had expected a lot of things. Gaslighting, excuses, guilt trips. But I hadn't expected honesty. That line pierced through the mess. You made us feel like we weren't doing enough. And maybe I did. Not intentionally. But my help, my structure, my calendars and reminders and delivery were reminders of what they didn't have under control. And instead of seeing my love, they saw their own shame. Still, that didn't justify how they treated me. Celine guided the conversation toward next steps, asking each of us what we'd want going forward. Lucas said he wanted open communication. Claire said she wanted less judgment. I said I wanted space. Clear. Define space. I told them I wasn't angry anymore. But I also wasn't interested in rebuilding trust with people who made it clear he wasn't safe around them. You could almost hear the disappointment on their end, like they thought this call would somehow reset the clock. Like I was going to cry and say I miss them, and everything would return to the way it used to be. But I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of family. The version I kept hoping would appear if I just did more. After the call, I shut my laptop and felt a weird lightness. Not joy. Just air. No more secrets. No more pretending. A few weeks passed. I stopped thinking about them. Mostly. Then one afternoon, while checking my mailbox, I saw a manila envelope with no return address. My name was handwritten in thick marker. Inside was a stack of old photos. Me as a kid, sitting on the swing set in our backyard. Me holding Lucas's hand when he was a toddler, grinning in a way I hadn't in years. One photo in particular stopped me. Me at maybe 9 or 10, sitting next to my dad at the kitchen table while he tried to teach me chess. His face is soft, my eyes wide. Claire must have taken it. Taped to the back of that one was a sticky note. We did love you. We just didn't know how to show it. Mom, no signature. No date. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, because that's the thing about emotional neglect. It doesn't always look like yelling or slamming doors. Sometimes it looks like silence. Like meals without conversation. Like birthdays forgotten or dismissed. Like effort going unnoticed. Until it disappears completely. That note, it didn't fix anything, but it did explain a little more. Still, I didn't reach out. I didn't return the photos. They live in a drawer now, near my passport and birth certificate. A part of my history, but no longer part of my everyday. Micah and I still talk. He got into a community college program and is working part-time at a grocery store. Sometimes he'll text me photos of a healthy meal he made and joke, channeling Aunt Ava. It always makes me smile. He's breaking the cycle quietly, and that's enough for me right now. I think the biggest lie we tell ourselves about family is that blood equals bond. It doesn't. Sometimes you find more kinship in strangers than in people who raised you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't spite, it's peace. It's leaving the room and letting them sit with the silence they created. 6 months after the mediation call, I got a letter in the mail. A real letter. Handwritten. In Rosa List tight CURSIVE. It wasn't emotional or even apologetic. It was logistical. She asked if I could help with some financial paperwork related to Dad's pension. Apparently, some of his benefits were being delayed due to incomplete filings. She didn't say please. She didn't acknowledge anything from the past, just asked for help, as if none of it had ever happened. I stared at that letter for a long time, folded it up, put it in a drawer next to the old photos. Then I started thinking, there's this accounting conference that comes to Asheville every fall, a mix of CPA letters, small firm owners, tax specialists, and nonprofit reps. I've been attending it for years. But this year, I did something a little different. I signed up to host a panel titled Invisible Labor, When Financial Support Becomes Emotional Abuse. I didn't name names. I didn't even make it personal in the promotional materials. But when the panel began, I stood on stage in front of maybe 60 other professionals, mostly women in their 40s, 50s, even 60s, and I told my story. Not in the petty, angry way, in a clear, calm, pointed way. I talked about the years of hidden grocery deliveries, the silent caretaking, the cold shoulders and guilt trips. I told them how easily being helpful becomes being expected, how boundaries are not cruel, their clarity. I talked about the text. About awkward, about canceling the cards and finding peace. The room was silent, and then it wasn't. People lined up afterward to talk to me. One woman cried and said she hadn't spoken to her own mother in 2 years and always felt ashamed. Another handed me her card and said she was writing a book about financial enmeshment. Another simply hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for saying it out loud." That night, I went home lighter than I had felt in years. But the true revenge, that came later. The shelter I'd been donating to had just opened a financial literacy program. They asked me to lead a 6-week workshop for women trying to rebuild after leaving toxic situations. Some had fled abusive partners. Others were like me, caretakers who'd been emotionally drained by their familia central. They had nothing left. I said yes. Every Wednesday night. I stood in that shelter's rec room with a whiteboard and a stack of worksheets. I taught those women how to open checking accounts, how to build a budget, how to get credit reports cleaned up. We talked about debt. About fear, about starting over when you've been convinced you have no worth. And then I got an idea. I took all of that material, all the budgeting templates, the financial checklists, the motivational emails I'd been sending to women, and turned it into a free online course. I called it Awkward, Reclaiming Power When They Tell You You're Too Much. That name, yeah, it was deliberate. Within 3 months, over 5,000 women had signed up. One of them emailed me and said, I used to be ashamed that I walked away from my family, but now I realize I walked toward myself. Thank you for showing me how. I printed that email out, framed it, put it on the wall above my desk, right where the old framed family photo used to hang. Then, months later, Lucas found out. I don't know how. Maybe someone sent him the course link, or maybe he just stumbled across it. But one morning, I woke up to an email from him. Subject line, nice branding, sis buddy. Hope you're proud of yourself exploiting our family drama. For internet points, no punctuation. Still passive aggressive. Still him. I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted it. Posted it anonymously on the course's private forum, along with a note to my students. When you take your power back, people who benefited from your silence will call it betrayal. Let them. They flooded me with support. Dozens of messages, comments like, we've all gotten that email. You're not alone. My brother sent the same thing when I started therapy. That message means you're doing something right. I smiled because that was the revenge. Not shouting. Not burning bridges. Not cutting people off in a blaze of glory. Just healing in public. Thriving loudly, turning their attempts to shame Manto tools for someone else's liberation. And every time someone signs up for Awkward, I get a quiet notification in my inbox. Sometimes it comes at to a m. Sometimes during lunch. But every ping is another tiny, beautiful act of revenge. Because I could have stayed small. I could have apologized for being too much. Instead, I gave the world everything they tried to make me hide. And that is enough. That is peace. That is justice.